You ever do something that doesn't feel like you? Like you're standing outside yourself, watching it happen, and you don't know how you got there? That's what this was. It didn't start with desire. It didn't start with temptation. It started with someone who looked like he was breaking. And me, trying to be kind. I wasn't searching for anything. I wasn't lonely in the way people think. I had a husband, a home, a life that looked full on the outside, but inside, it was all quiet. Too quiet. I was tired of being the one who held everything together. Tired of making dinners no one said thank you for. Tired of sleeping beside a man who didn't notice when I stopped trying. Tired of carrying emotions I couldn't name. Then he showed up. Not bold. Not confident. Just broken. He said thank you like it hurt to say. He smiled like he hadn't done it in weeks. And for some reason, I saw myself in him. The version of me no one ever asked about. I didn't plan anything. I didn't think it was dangerous. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. But kindness has sharp edges when you're not careful. And something about the way he looked at me. It didn't feel wrong at first. It felt warm, familiar, safe. That was the mistake. Because what started as comfort turned into something else. Something that whispered instead of screamed. Something that didn't knock down the door, it crept in through the cracks. They say some regrets live loud. But mine was quiet. It came with a soft voice, a broken thank you, and the feeling of finally being seen. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to help him. But somehow I became the thing he needed. And the line between comfort and betrayal disappeared before I even knew I was standing on it. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. I'm 38. 2 kids. 14 years married. From the outside, it looks like I've got it all together. But the truth? I'm tired. Not the kind of tired a nap can fix. The kind that lives in your bones, in your smile, in the way you stop expecting anything different. My husband. He's not a bad man. He works hard. Pays the bills. He's present, but only in the way furniture is present. You can lean on it, sit next to it, but it never leans back. We don't fight. We don't scream. We just exist. In the same house, in separate corners. There are moments, quiet ones, where I wonder if he even sees me anymore. If he ever really did. I make the lunches. I wash the clothes. I pick up the kids. And somewhere in between all that, I disappeared. Then came him. 24. Fresh pain still sitting behind his eyes. He was my son's old tutor, back when he was just starting school. Smart. Gentle. Never loud. Never demanding. He showed up at our door because his apartment lease ended, and he needed a place to land for a bit. My husband didn't blink twice. Said the guest house was free anyway. I remember the first night, he knocked softly on the door, holding his bag like it might fall apart in his hands. I opened it, smiled. He looked at me, like he was scared to say too much. Then he said it. Thank you. But it wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Like no one had said you're welcome to him in a long time. Like he didn't expect kindness anymore. Like maybe he didn't think he deserved it. And something inside me cracked open. He kept to himself mostly. Stayed out of the way. But I noticed the little things. The way he lingered near the kitchen when I was cooking. The way his face softened when he heard the kids laughing. The way he looked tired, not the kind you sleep off, but the kind that comes from being left behind too many times. I offered him a plate one night. He tried to say no, politely, but I handed it to him anyway. He looked at it like it was something sacred. That night, I watched him eat from the window. Alone. Quiet. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not attraction. Not desire. But connection. That aching recognition of loneliness in someone else's body. He was polite. Always. Always asked before taking. Always thanked me when I gave. But there was this weight in his voice. Like he was afraid he might wear out his welcome. Like he was used to doors closing in his face. And me? I started looking for excuses to check in. Need towels. Need more tea. Everything okay in there? I told myself it was nothing. Just hospitality. Just being kind. But deep down, I already knew. Something was shifting. Not between us, not yet. But inside me, like I'd been sleepwalking for years, and suddenly someone whispered my name. It scared me, because I didn't know how much of myself I had buried until someone looked at me like I was still alive. And the worst part? It felt good. To be seen. To be heard. To be noticed without asking for it. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning. The moment everything started to move, quietly, slowly, like water finding its way through a crack in the wall. And once it starts, you can't undo the damage. You can only watch as the flood comes closer. It was raining. One of those cold, heavy rains that soaks through your skin and settles in your chest. The kind that makes everything feel heavier than it already is. It was our anniversary. 14 years. I had set the table. Candles, napkins folded just so. Even cooked his favorite, chicken parmesan, extra garlic, just like he likes it. I don't know why I still tried. He called around 6. Said work ran late. Said traffic was bad. Said he'd be too tired by the time he got home. Didn't say sorry. Didn't even ask what I'd planned. Just hung up. Like it was just another Tuesday. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the phone. The food sat untouched. The wine unopened. The silence allowed. I cleaned up, packed the food away. But something stopped me before I sealed the containers. An extra plate. Still warm. I don't know why, but I put it on a tray and walked out into the rain. The guest house wasn't far, but the walk felt longer than usual, each step heavier than the last. I knocked gently. No answer. The light was on. I let myself in. He was on the floor, not sitting, not standing, just folded, like someone who had finally run out of strength. His shoulders shook before I even said a word. He didn't look up. Didn't wipe his face. Just whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cry. I don't have anyone else." I stood there, holding that tray, my heart cracking open. And without thinking, I set it down and I sat beside him. We didn't talk at first. We just sat, side by side, like two people who didn't have the energy to pretend. The rain tapped the roof in soft, steady beats. The kind of sound that makes you say things you shouldn't. The kind that makes silence feel too loud. Then he spoke. About his ex. About how she left without explanation. How it's been months, and he still checks his phone like a fool. How he wakes up every morning hoping today won't feel like a burden. I didn't say much. Just listened. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew what that ache felt like. Not the heartbreak. The invisibility. He looked at me finally. Eyes red, lashes wet. And something passed between us. Not passion. Not desire. Just recognition. I reached out, without thinking, to squeeze his hand, but he moved at the same time, and my fingers brushed his wrist instead. We both froze. His skin was warm. My breath caught. We didn't pull away. Not right away. It was just a second. A single, suspended second. But it held too much. He looked down. And I stood up. Quick. Awkward. Said something about getting back to the kids. Told him to eat before it got cold. He nodded. Didn't say anything else. But as I walked back through the rain, I could still feel it. That quiet, electric touch. Soft. Barely there. But enough to light a match in a room I didn't even know had gasoline. That was the moment. The one I go back to in my mind. The one that whispers you knew then. You felt it. You could have stopped it. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part that hadn't felt warmth in years, didn't want to. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just human connection. Just kindness. He was hurting. I saw it. And I was there. That's all it was. That's what I told myself. But something had shifted. Not between us, not yet. Inside me. I woke up, and the air felt different. I noticed the way light came through the curtains. I noticed the way my skin felt under warm water. I looked in the mirror, longer than usual. I started putting on a little lip balm before taking the trash out. Started brushing my hair, even if I wasn't going anywhere. Not for him. Not because of him. But because, for the first time in a long time, I wanted to feel seen again. I found reasons to walk past the guest house, carrying laundry, checking the hose, pretending to look for a misplaced toy. I'd glance toward his window just in case he was there. Sometimes he was. Sometimes he looked up. Sometimes he smiled. And I'd feel it again, that spark. That whisper of warmth in a house that had gone cold. I told myself I was helping him heal, that he needed someone who listened, someone gentle, someone present. But some nights, when I was lying in bed, my husband snoring next to me like I wasn't even there, I'd wonder who was really doing the healing. Because when he talked, I felt like I mattered. When he looked at me, I felt like more than a shadow. It wasn't just about him. It was about me. The version of me I'd buried under motherhood, under routine, under quiet sacrifices no one ever thanked me for. He saw her. He saw the woman who still had thoughts, opinions, warmth. Not just the one who made dinner and folded socks. My husband. He didn't notice the change. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care enough to ask. I started to pay attention to how often he looked at his phone instead of me. How often he gave more emotion to work emails than to our conversations. How often I said good night, and he just grunted, without even looking up. There were nights I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the pull in my chest. This ache I didn't know what to do with. And outside, in the guest house, he was probably lying awake too. Hurting. Alone. I thought about checking on him again. I didn't. But the thought lingered. Every smile felt softer. Every glance lasted a second too long. Every word felt like a thread weaving us closer, quietly, without permission. I wasn't in love. I wasn't planning anything. But I was falling into something. Something warm. Something dangerous. Something I wasn't sure I could stop. Even if I tried. It started small. A few more words here and there. A shared laugh over something silly. Moments that didn't feel like anything until they did. I found myself lingering in the kitchen after the kids went to bed. Waiting, not for anything obvious. Just listening for footsteps. For the soft creak of the guest house door. Sometimes he'd show up by the back porch. Hands in his pockets, quiet smile on his face. Just stretching my legs, he'd say. And I'd nod, like that was all it was. One night, we sat in the living room. The kids were at their grandparents'. My husband was out of town for a conference. It was late. Too late, probably. But we were watching an old movie, something nostalgic and harmless. We weren't even sitting close. But the space between us, it didn't feel empty. It felt charged. Like a wire humming low just under the surface. We laughed. Easy. Natural. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. Then the storm hit. Loud. Sudden. And the lights flickered, then went out completely. For a second, neither of us moved. The silence pressed in. The only sound was the rain pelting the windows. Then he stood. Lit a candle. Placed it on the coffee table. And in that golden, flickering light, he looked different. Not younger. Not older. Just softer. Real. He sat back down. Closer this time. And without even thinking, we started to talk. Not about the weather. Not about the movie. About life. About ache. I told him how it feels to live with someone who doesn't ask how your day was. How it feels to be needed for everything, but noticed for nothing. How you can be surrounded by people and still feel like a ghost in your own home. He listened. really listened. Then he spoke. About being raised by parents who argued more than they hugged. About never really knowing what safety felt like. About how every time he trusted someone, they left. His voice cracked when he said it. I don't even expect people to stay anymore. There was a pause. That heavy kind that feels like the air itself is holding its breath. Then he looked at me, right in the eyes, and said, "You deserve more than that kind of silence." I didn't say anything, couldn't, because something about the way he said it, so steady, so certain, it undid something in me. I stood up, said I should get some sleep. He didn't stop me, didn't move. I walked away, but before I reached the hallway, I looked back. He was still sitting there, hands clasped together, staring into the candle like it held all the answers he never got. I climbed into bed that night, but I didn't sleep. Not really. I kept thinking about his voice. The way it sounded when he said I deserved more. Like he meant it. Like he saw me. The next night, I didn't bring him food. He came to me instead. It was a Wednesday. Nothing special. Nothing dramatic. Just one more night where the silence between us was louder than anything I could bear. Dinner was cold by the time he came home. He didn't notice. Didn't ask why I hadn't eaten. He sat down, scrolled through his phone, answered an email with more emotion than I'd heard from him in weeks. I asked him gently if we could talk. He looked up, sighed, said, "Now's not a good time." And I don't know what snapped inside me, but it did, because I was done pretending the crumbs he gave me were enough. Done swallowing my words to keep the peace. Done being a body in a room that nobody really looked at. I didn't yell. I just broke. Tears came, slow and stubborn, as I stood there in the kitchen. Still in the clothes I wore all day. Still holding a dish towel in my hand like that somehow anchored me. He didn't follow me when I walked away. Didn't ask what was wrong. Didn't ask anything at all. I sat on the cold tile floor, back against the cabinet, breathing through my teeth so the kids wouldn't hear me cry. And then I heard the door open. Not the front door. The back. His footsteps, soft, careful. Not the heavy, oblivious ones I'd grown used to, but intentional. Like someone walking into a room where something sacred had fallen. He didn't say a word. Didn't ask what happened. He just knelt down beside me and pulled me into his arms. I didn't resist. Didn't think. I just let it happen. His chest was warm. His breath slow. He didn't speak, but something about the way he held me said everything I'd been waiting to hear. It wasn't lust. It wasn't even planned. It was a moment too full of everything I'd buried. All the unmet needs. All the quiet heartbreak. All the nights I cried into a pillow, trying not to wake the man who used to hold me and didn't anymore. I lifted my face, and he looked at me like I was whole. Not broken. Not invisible. Just seen. Our lips met. Soft. Careful. Like we were testing something neither of us could name. And in that second, the world faded. There was no husband. No years of silence. No guilt. No logic. Just breath. Just warmth. Just the terrifying comfort of being wanted. Fade to black? Maybe. But it didn't end there. It should have. I should have stopped it there. But I didn't. The next morning, I couldn't look at myself. Couldn't look at him either. I stayed inside. Kept busy, cleaning things that were already clean. Folding clothes that didn't need folding. Pretending if I just stayed in motion, nothing would catch up with me. I avoided the window. Didn't want to know if he was out there. Didn't want to feel that pull again. Didn't want to feel anything. My phone buzzed late that afternoon. Just one message. I didn't mean to make things worse. I stared at it. Didn't reply. Because I didn't know what to say. Because part of me wanted to say everything. And another part, the one buried under guilt, wanted to go back in time and erase it all. But that moment had already happened. And silence wasn't going to make it go away. That night, I sat across from my husband at the dinner table. He chewed slowly, reading the news on his phone with one hand, fork in the other. We hadn't said more than a few words all day. Then he looked up, fairly, and said, "You okay?" Just like that. Flat. Distant. Like someone checking the weather. I nodded. Forced a smile. Said something like, "Just tired." He nodded back. Maybe it's hormones. And, just like that, the conversation ended. No real curiosity. No real concern. Just another brush off. I excused myself early. Said I needed to check on something upstairs. But I didn't. I just stood in the hallway. Hands shaking. Heart pounding for reasons I couldn't name. The next day, my son came into the kitchen. He was coloring something, sloppy, joyful strokes of blue and orange. He held it up to show me, grinning. But then he paused, looked at my face, and asked, "Why don't you smile anymore, Mommy?" And that broke me, because I didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a child that sometimes grown-ups disappear without ever leaving the room? That sometimes their hearts pack a suitcase long before their bodies do? I bent down, hugged him tighter than I meant to, told him I was just tired. Again with the tired. It's always the excuse, isn't it? I washed the dishes later that evening, hands buried in soapy water, trying to scrub the guilt off my skin. And through the window, there he was, standing outside the guest house. Still, alone, looking down at something in his hands. Probably his phone. Maybe reading the message I never replied to. He looked smaller somehow, like someone waiting for something that wasn't coming. And I felt it again. That ache. That ache I had tried to bury under shame. It was a mistake. I knew that. But why did it feel so honest? Why did it feel like the first real thing I'd touched in years? I started writing again. Not poems. Not essays. Just pages in a journal I hadn't touched in years. Bent cover. Torn edges. Still smelled like dust and old perfume. At first, the words came slow. Scattered. Like even my thoughts were ashamed to come out in full sentences. But eventually, they poured. I didn't cheat because I stopped loving my husband. I wrote that over and over like maybe if I repeated it enough, I'd believe it. I cheated because I forgot how to feel. I forgot what it was like to be touched gently. To be seen without being needed. To be wanted without being used. It wasn't about passion. It wasn't even about him. It was about me. The me that got lost somewhere between bottle warmers and late-night grocery runs. Between doctor appointments and permission slips. Between the nights I cried in the bathroom quietly so I wouldn't wake anyone, especially the man I married. He hadn't touched me in months. And when he did, it was out of obligation, not curiosity, not wonder. I used to believe that love was what stayed, what kept showing up. But now, I don't know. Maybe love is also what sees. And when no one sees you for too long, you start to disappear, even from yourself. I thought about telling him. Not the boy in the guest house. My husband. Thought about sitting across from him at that cold kitchen table and saying it plain. I made a mistake. And it wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was real. And I don't even know if I'm sorry. But I didn't. Because how do you confess to someone who's stopped listening a long time ago? And what would I be confessing? That I kissed a broken boy with soft hands and sad eyes? That for one night, I let my loneliness speak louder than my vows? Or would I be confessing something deeper? That somewhere along the way, I gave up on being chosen. So when someone finally reached for me, I didn't pull away. He left. Quietly. No goodbye. No note. Just gone. The guest house key on the table. His room cleaned. His scent still hanging in the air faint, like a memory you can't quite hold onto but never really forget. I checked my phone once. Maybe twice. Hoping. Not for another kiss. Not for an apology. Just for something that said, "You mattered, too." But nothing came. Now some nights, I still see him. In dreams that don't feel romantic. Just soft. Sometimes we're sitting under that candlelight again, just talking, just being, and I wake up with this ache, not for him, but for the version of me that finally felt warm. I wanted to help him. That's how it started. But maybe I was the one who needed saving. Have you ever tried to fix someone only to realize you were breaking yourself in the process? Have you ever poured kindness into someone else just to fill the emptiness you weren't brave enough to name? Because that's what I did. I told myself I was helping, that I was being good, compassionate, human, but somewhere between the meals I brought and the quiet we shared, I stopped seeing him as someone I could save, and started feeling like he was saving me. I know what it sounds like. I know the labels people are quick to throw around. Cheater, liar, weak. But what if it wasn't weakness? What if it was finally being seen? What if it was that one fragile, unguarded moment where you stop trying to survive your life and start feeling it again? What if you weren't chasing desire, but just looking for a mirror to remember who you used to be before the world told you to shrink? Tell me, have you ever done something you can't justify, but also can't regret? Not because it was right, but because, for the first time in years, it felt like truth? Maybe your truth looks different. Maybe it lives in silence, or shame, or the things you never dared to say out loud. But still, I want to know. Share your truth in the comments. No judgment, just honesty. Like this story? Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. Tap the bell. The next tale might echo something you've never dared say aloud. Some betrayals aren't loud. They don't come with slammed doors or shouted names. They happen in borrowed shirts, in quiet kitchens, in glances held too long, in hearts that wanted to do good and got lost in the trying. I never saw him again, but I see him in the way I hesitate before kindness now, in the way I double-check my silence, in the way I wonder if he remembers me as the woman who helped him or the one who failed us both. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where the stories we can't say out loud finally get a voice.